Kerry Ehrin, you're one of the creators, writers, and executive producers of '80s Bates Motel. Where did the idea first come from to explore Norman Bates's early years?
I don't actually know where it first came from because I was actually the last person brought on to the project. Um, I know Universal wanted to develop it. Obviously, they own the rights to Hitchcock's library. Um, it was first pitched to me by Russell Rothberg at Universal, and I think the idea that was really appealing to me personally was the opportunity to tell a story about a dysfunctional family um, that wasn't entirely bleak. I think that when you live in dysfunction, I think that the interesting thing about it is like every day is very high stakes because it's very chaotic and you don't know what's going to happen. You get very, very bonded to people. And I was very personally interested in telling a story about sort of the beautiful side of that. Well, yes, it's dysfunctional. Yes, you're inhumanly bonded to people in perhaps a not healthy way, but that it was also something larger than life and actually common in dysfunction. So that was what really appealed to me about it.
And that's one of the interesting things about the show, I think, is that, I mean, going into it knowing it's the prequel to Psycho, you sort of expect a horror show in a certain sense, but you really see a much more sympathetic portrait of these characters than maybe we'd expect going into it. Is that,
Yeah,
you really
I think
wanted to?
I think that was always our goal. I mean, from the very first, lunch I had with Carlton, we kind of sat down and started like putting together both of the ideas, like the kind of just the world of ideas that we had for the show. And I think that was always really important to us to tell a very human story. Um, Certainly to deliver a thriller. I mean, it had to be a thriller. It had to be. It had to have, suspense and be dark and all that. But definitely to tell a true story of real people.
The story takes place during Norman Bates' teenage years, but even though the film was in 1960, you set this story in the present day. Did
Yeah,
you ever consider setting it in a period setting, or did you always intend for it to be contemporary?
I did consider setting it in a period setting. Carlton was the person who very strongly advocated a contemporary retelling, which was a brilliant idea because it really freed us from the hugeness, the iconicness of what the movie is, and it allowed us to reinvent it.
Yeah, and Psycho, of course, is such an iconic film, and Hitchcock such an iconic director.
Yeah.
Were you ever concerned with the comparisons you might face? Have you people looking at this and sort of holding it up against Psycho?
Absolutely. I mean, Carlton and I both thought long and hard about taking it on because it's the kind of thing you could do a total face dive. Because yeah, it's a pretty good movie, and it's a beloved movie. But I think at the end of the day, it was such a compelling idea to be able to tell the story of that mother and son. And it really is, it's a question you're left with when you watch Psycho, is who was his mother? Who was that woman? Who was the parental counterpart to Norman Bates? And, everything we know about her, we know from the movie, and it's told through the point of view of a psycho. So it's not a terribly reliable narrator, So then you take a step back from that and you start to think, what was this relationship? And I think that's such an interesting question that I think it really gave the series a life
Since
that could that could coincide with the film.
since as you said, what we know about Norman's mother comes from sort of Norman's psychotic image of her in his mind,
Yeah,
and sort of don't actually know the real woman. Did you
yeah.
feel you had a lot of extra room to interpret her and flesh her out on your own terms?
Absolutely, yes. I think what you take away from the film is that she's an abusive shrew, and I think what's so interesting about this story is it really is a story about parents and children. And I think that we all, like, the parental bond is so strong, and we all have a lot of different versions of our parents that we carry around in our head. There's the incredibly loving parent, there's the supportive parent, there's the parent that was yelling at you when didn't do something right, and it's like they're all kind of mixed up together in there. And I think the idea of playing out those different parts of her in a real way was just so enticing. And I think Vera is, I mean, how lucky did we get with her? I mean, she's so mesmerizing in this role.
And it's really interesting because when we see things from Norman's point of view in the film, and we sort of think of him as the monster that he became, and so we almost sort of expect the show, or at least I did. I wasn't sure. Maybe we see the mother who created the monster, the crazy mother of crazy Norman, but she's actually very funny and supportive and all of that. And what was it like developing that character with Vera?
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I was just wondering what it was like to develop that character with Vera.
It was and is just thrilling. Honestly, it's creatively thrilling. It's such a multi-dimensional character. It's such a complicated character. She's so emotionally fragile, and yet at times when she's backed in a corner, she just comes out with her guns ablazing. And working with Vera brings such a truth to her. She's always real. It's always grounded. And Vera's just so incredibly talented. You just keep wanting to throw more at her. It's like, maybe she could, let's give her this, let's have her, and I mean, there is no more fun creative playground than that, honestly, to have an amazing character and amazing actors to do them.
And on top of everything else you gave her that musical number early on in the season where she's singing Maybe This Time. Is she a singer? Does she have experience in that? Did you know that she'd be able to tackle that as well as she did?
No. Actually, she had pitched a really hilarious idea to us toward the end of the first season, which was where Freddie wants to try out for a show, and Norma, in support of him, goes, but totally outshines him. And we just thought that was such a fun idea, and then we kind of upped the ante by making it a musical. And it was a little scary. I mean, it was not your normal thriller story, but it had it fit in so well to the thriller part of that particular episode. It made such a beautiful emotional landing place for it. Particularly that scene with her and Freddie in the parking lot outside the theater they're both just amazing in that scene. And so it all worked, but yeah, definitely, she made that work. And she's not, I think she has a beautiful voice, but it's not like she goes around, calling herself a singer. She should be.
Norman Bates is obviously an iconic character and a very recognizable performance by Anthony Perkins in the film, so casting that role must have been incredibly, a very careful consideration going into that. But Freddie Highmore, he does bear such a striking resemblance to Perkins in that film. What was the process like casting him in that role?
Well, that's funny because Freddie was the first person that April Webster, our amazing casting director, put us together with. We had a Skype call with him in London, and I had only known him really as a child actor, so I didn't really know what he was like as a young man. And he was so charming. He was so funny and incredibly intelligent. we just loved him, and we immediately loved him. But he was the first person we saw, so we were thinking like, well, we have to see other people, you know. And then we looked at other people, and there was no one else after him. There was no one else ever in our minds, you know. It was yeah, you know, and carving out his deal was difficult because he's studying in Cambridge, and we had to arrange production so he could go back and finish his studies at university. But I always felt like he was going to do it because he was supposed to do it. He's really so brilliant in that role.
Norman Bates, he created, and you, the writers, created during that first season, is very sympathetic, you know, shy, sensitive, and well-meaning. Mm-hmm. Were you ever concerned about making the audience maybe like him too much before you really get to develop his dark side?
I personally wasn't, because one of the things I always loved about Psycho is how incredibly endearing Norman Bates is in the film. He's adorable. He's like the most likable, adorable serial killer ever created. So I was not worried about that, because I think that's true to who the character is. I think he's a pleaser. I think he wants things to be okay. I think he wants to, you know, on the surface part of him, the part that isn't, you know, totally confused and lost, I do think he's a decent person, and I think that's part of the heartbreak of the story, is that he doesn't know who he is, and he doesn't understand it enough to control it, which is truly heartbreaking, you know. And so I have so much empathy for that character, and I think the way that Freddie himself is just so incredibly endearing. He's such a lovely person, and I think that, you know, I think he's perfect for it.
In the second season finale, you revealed that Norman Bates did in fact kill his teacher, Blair Watson. Is this a significant tipping point for him in the show, do you think? Can we expect more of the psychosis to be coming out from here on out?
Yes. I mean, I think part of the storytelling that is so thrilling to Carlton and myself is tracking the de-evolution, tracking, you know, his immersion into being lost in this mental illness where, you know, he doesn't know what's real and what isn't. The character in the film was based on Ed Gein, who is a fairly famous serial killer, and he was a very tragic figure. He actually he was a grave robber, and he would bring bodies back to the house, and he would imagine they were real, that they were there with him. He was so isolated, you know, and I think that I just think that's so heartbreaking. I mean, obviously, it's heartbreaking for people. I mean, writing about a serial killer is heartbreaking for everyone. It's like, it's a horrible part of the world that exists. But it is hard to not, you know, it's hard to hear that and not have your heart break a little bit for that person.
Now, Bates Motel isn't just a two-person show. It's you developed this whole community of White Pine Bay with its own cast of characters and its whole economy, which it turns out to be, you know, driven by the drug trade. How did you and the other writers decide what that community would be like, what those conflicts would be in those characters?
That was just really the fun of spitballing in the room with Carlton. You know, just trying to get a take on the people in this town. I think we always wanted to create a fabric, a texture to the town that was about secrets, because the whole show is based on an edible complex, which is something that exists as a term because it's in everyone. You know, it's like, it's a part of people they don't want to acknowledge. So it was very interesting to try to find stories about people that were secrets, that were not things that they necessarily wanted to acknowledge, but that were going on, you know. And I think it was always and continues to be really important to try to tell the story of these people in a real way, where they're not just bad guys. They have desperate motivations for what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that that's one of the really lovely things about this show is I do think it's telling the story of people's internal paths, what they're trying to accomplish, what they think they're accomplishing in these desperate situations, told against what is actually happening. And I think that's such a it's such a rich world, and it's such a gift to a creator to be able to work in that.
And that theme of secret lives is very very true, I think. You know, especially for a teenager like Norman. You know, you feel almost like, you know, the idea of him hiding this part of himself, not understanding this part of himself, is almost like a metaphor for just being a teenager and having parts of yourself that you're afraid to reveal or afraid of. And most of us, you know, luckily don't have it be, you know, a serial killer.
Yes.
But you really feel like this is sort of a, you know, an allegory of adolescence in a larger sense?
It is weirdly relatable. It is. And I think high school is such an interesting time. I think people don't know who they are. I think everybody is looking at everyone else and judging themselves against those people, and yet that's a facade. So it's a world of facades where everyone's trying to move around within it and establish themselves and to understand and know who they are. So it is truly fascinating, and I do think you're exactly right. I think that's very relatable to people.
Now, if we look at the original movie, we sort of get a good idea of where the story is headed, but part of me wonders if it's foolish to assume you're going to follow the same sequence of events, since, you know, you've already taken liberties with the town and setting it in present day. You know, of course, without giving away the end game. Can you tell us if you and the other writers have considered, you know, what liberties you might take, or if you could deviate in a big way and take the story in directions we're not expecting?
Well, Carlton and I both fell in love with this project in part because it's an opportunity to tell a tragedy, and I think this is a story, and I think it has to drive to a point. I feel like you would be robbing the audience if you suddenly like took a left turn and went on to a different destination. I mean, it is what the story is. It's what the story has to be. How you get there is, I think, much more open. Because none of that was on screen in Psycho. We don't know what happened. We don't know what was happening in that house when Marion Crane was there. You know, what was going on in that? What was Norman believing that was happening in that house? You know, that's such rich material and such fascinating territory. So I do feel like it's going to be surprising and fresh. But I do feel like we are telling a really, you know, an iconic tragedy. I think the funny thing is, you know, when you watch a tragedy, you always want it to end differently. You know, you want King Lear to like get his shit together and like not screw it up, you know. And I think that that's part of this too. It's like I think people are so engaged in the characters, they just desperately want them to like get it right, you know. And I do. I mean, when I write it, I'm certainly in some denial about where it's going, because it would break my heart to like think about it as you like write, you know, a script. You kind of have to just live in the moment with them, and in the moment you hope the best for them.
Marcus in our chat room wants to know if you wish you could produce more than 10 episodes per season, or if you like the shorter episode story for your storytelling.
Yes and no. I think, you know, we love the show so much and we love the characters and the world of the show that, yes, it would be really tempting to try to do more episodes, but Carlton and I both really believe that because of what I was just saying, that it is a story with a destination, that you can't dilute it too much without it becoming a different thing. And I think that would be a mistake. Carlton and I are very focused on delivering a very tight, emotional, psychological thriller, and you do not want to dilute that. It will hurt it in the end. It will make it less good. So we shy away from doing more than that.
In addition to the show being on the Emmy ballot for Best Drama Series and lead acting and other actors on the ballot, you're on the ballot twice for Best Writing for the episodes The Box and The Immutable Truth, which were the last two episodes of the season. What about those two episodes do you think stand out from the rest of the season?
I think they're a convergence of all the stories. I think we made a very clear choice in season 2 to not just repeat what worked in season 1. We really wanted to have a different feeling to it. That Norma was happy, that she was kind of getting what she wanted, seemed fascinating to us, told against this unraveling of Norman where he starts to realize that he killed Miss Watson. That seemed much more interesting to us than other people suspecting he killed Miss Watson. And I think that plus the heartbreaking storyline with Dylan, where he's estranged from his family, the information he finds out about his father, who his father is, all of those stories, the drug war, they all converged in those two episodes in such a exciting way. I think that it just made for really strong episodes.
Well, I want to wish you the best of luck for the Emmys this year. Vera was nominated last year, and Vera and Freddie are nominated both at Critics' Choice. That must be very exciting.
It is really exciting, and I'm just so honored and proud and blessed to be able to work with them. It's lovely to be acknowledged, and I just think they're both so insanely talented and bring so much to these roles. That blows my mind literally every day in editing, just so I'm thrilled.
Well, I want to wish you the best of luck, hopefully at the Emmys again this year for Vera and the rest of the show, and with telling the rest of your story, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. We're very honored to be included in this. Thank you so much.